The night was quiet when it happened. Sandra and Keanu had just finished a long day on set, the kind of day that drains your energy but leaves your heart strangely awake. The studio lights were off, the crew was gone, and only the faint hum of distant machines echoed across the empty lot. Sandra walked beside Keanu, both tired yet calm, ready to head home. But then something small and old caught her eye near one of the storage boxes. It looked like a tiny notebook, covered in dust, edges worn out as if it had waited a long time to be found. She paused and picked it up gently. The paper felt fragile but warm, as if it carried memories inside it. "Keanu," she said softly, "look at this." Keanu turned, curious. He stepped closer and saw the little journal in her hands. For a moment his eyes locked on it, and Sandra noticed a strange flicker in his expression. It was not fear, not shock. It was deeper, quieter, like a memory touching a hidden place. "Where did you find that?" he asked. "Right here," she said. "It looks really old." Keanu stared at the journal. He did not move. He did not blink. Sandra felt a sudden heaviness around them, as if the air itself waited for what he would say next. She opened the cover slowly. The first page had handwriting that was soft and careful. It was only a few words, but enough to stop both of them. "One day, when I am strong enough, I will return and keep my promise." Sandra looked at Keanu again. His face had changed. He looked calm, but his eyes carried a mix of sadness and strength. She had known him for years, but she had never seen that exact look before. It was not the look of a movie star. It was the look of a man who had lived through something and carried it with honor. "Keanu," she whispered, "is this yours?" He nodded slowly. She held the journal with more care now. "Do you want to tell me what promise you wrote about?" Keanu took a long breath, but not a pause. It was a steady breath, like someone preparing to open a door they had kept shut for years. "I wrote that when I was much younger," he said. "I made a promise to someone important. I said I would return when I understood life better, when I understood how to treat people with real kindness, when I learned how to be someone worth trusting." Sandra listened quietly. She did not interrupt. She knew Keanu only spoke this way when the emotions ran deep. He took the journal from her hands, opened the next page, and his voice softened. "I promised that no matter how far I went, no matter how lost I became, I would never let anger control my heart. I would never let success change who I am, and I would help people the same way I was once helped." Sandra felt her chest tighten. The words were simple but full of weight. "Why was this hidden here?" she asked. "I left it behind," he said. "A long time ago, before I even knew what my life would become. I thought I would come back for it, but the world moved fast. I grew up. I faced things, I learned things, and somewhere along the way I forgot this journal even existed." He turned a few more pages. Each one had sentences written with quiet honesty. "Kindness is not weakness, it is a choice. I must stay grounded, even when the world pulls me up. The real test is not fame, but humility. If I forget who I am, I lose everything." Sandra could feel something powerful building inside the moment. The journal was not just a piece of paper. It was a doorway into the past, into the version of Keanu who struggled, learned, and promised himself to live with respect and humility. But there was something else too, something unspoken. The promise was not only for him, it was for someone else, someone he never named. "Keanu," she said gently, "who was this promise for?" Keanu closed the journal halfway, holding it as if it were fragile. He looked down for a moment, then back at her. "Someone who taught me the value of patience and kindness," he said. "Someone who believed in me when I did not believe in myself." Sandra waited, her heart slow but steady. "And," he continued, "someone I hurt without meaning to." The silence that followed was heavy but peaceful. It was not the silence of fear. It was the silence that comes when a truth begins to rise. Sandra stepped closer. "Do you think it is time to face it now?" Keanu nodded. "I think this journal found us for a reason." She smiled softly. "Or maybe it waited for you to be ready." Keanu held the journal against his chest for a moment. His eyes were not sad anymore. They were clear, steady, and full of purpose. Sandra felt something shift between them, not romantic, but deeply human. A connection built on understanding, respect, and loyalty. "Will you read it with me?" he asked. "Of course," she said. They walked toward a quiet corner of the lot where an old bench sat under a soft, yellow light. They sat down together, the journal resting between them. The air around them felt still, as if the world wanted them to hear every word. Keanu opened the next page. The handwriting grew smaller, as if the writer had tried to fit thoughts that were too big for the paper. One day I will look back and understand why I went through pain. I will understand why I lost people. I will understand what life was trying to teach me. And when that day comes, I will return and keep my promise. Sandra felt her eyes burn, not with sadness but with deep empathy. She looked at Keanu. Do you think you are ready to understand it now? Keanu smiled gently. I think I finally am. But then something unexpected happened. As he turned another page, a small folded paper slipped out and fell onto the bench. It was not part of the journal. It looked newer, cleaner, untouched by time. Sandra picked it up with slow hands. She unfolded it. The paper had only one line. You are closer to the truth than you think. For a moment, neither of them breathed. Sandra looked at Keanu. This is not your handwriting. Keanu shook his head. No, it is. The air around them tensed. The forgotten journal was not forgotten after all. Someone had touched it. Someone had added that message. Someone who knew the secret promise. Someone who waited for this moment. Sandra felt a chill move through her chest. Keanu, she whispered, someone knew you would return. And Keanu, calm but alert, closed the journal slowly. Then the real story, he said, is just beginning. The bench felt colder now. The soft yellow light above them flickered as if reacting to the tension filling the air. Sandra held the small folded paper carefully, almost afraid that touching it too long would make the message change. Keanu stayed still beside her, but his calm expression had shifted into something sharper. Not fear, not confusion. It was the calm alertness he always had when something serious was happening. Keanu, Sandra said quietly, this note is new. Someone placed it here after you left the journal. Yes, he replied, and they wanted me to see it. Sandra looked around the empty lot. It was silent, but suddenly the silence felt watchful. The corners of the studio seemed darker. Even the faint hum of machines sounded distant. She leaned closer. Do you think someone has been keeping this journal safe for you? She asked. Maybe, he said, or maybe they were waiting for the right moment. He lifted the folded note from her hand and examined it. The handwriting was neat, soft, almost gentle, nothing threatening in the shape of the letters, but the meaning behind it felt deeper than the words. You are closer to the truth than you think. The truth about what? Sandra asked. Keanu closed his eyes for a moment before answering. The promise, the person I made it to, and the reason I walked away before I understood anything. Sandra watched his face carefully. She had acted with him for years, seen his range, watched him portray every emotion a script could demand. But this was different. This was not acting. This was real. A memory he had buried so deep that the moment it resurfaced, the whole world around him seemed to shift. Keanu, she said gently, what did you walk away from? He looked at her with slow, steady eyes. From someone who needed me, someone who believed I could be better, but I was young, careless. I did not understand what my presence meant to them. I made mistakes, and I broke a promise I never had the courage to face again. Sandra felt her chest tighten. She waited for him to continue, but Keanu took a breath and looked at the journal again. Instead of turning pages, he slowly closed it, as if preparing himself. There is more to this, he said. Someone knew I left this behind, someone kept it, someone waited. Sandra leaned back slightly, thinking, what if they wanted you to remember, to come back, to finish something? Keanu nodded slowly. Maybe they did. But just as Sandra opened her mouth to speak again, a soft sound echoed across the lot. It was small, like a step on gravel. She turned quickly. Nothing, only shadows, quiet and still. Keanu heard it too. He stood up gently, not in fear but in careful attention. Someone was here, Sandra whispered. Or someone is still here, Keanu answered calmly. The air felt different now, more charged, as if the journal had awakened something that had been waiting in silence. Keanu placed the journal inside his jacket and stepped toward the sound. Sandra followed him closely. They walked past empty set pieces, wooden crates, and silent cameras. The night air felt colder with every step. The moonlight hit the floor in long lines, making the shadows stretch and bend like hidden stories. And then they saw it. Near the back of the studio wall, under a soft beam of moonlight, something small was pinned to the wood. Keanu approached it with controlled steps. Sandra stayed behind him, her fingers curled slightly with tension. He reached the wall and stopped. A photograph was attached with a single pin. Sandra walked closer. The picture was old, but the faces were clear. It showed a young Keanu, years younger, standing beside a small child whose head leaned gently against his arm. Both were smiling. The child looked no older than 8. Sandra gasped softly, "Keanu, who is this?" He swallowed slowly. "Someone I should not have left behind." He touched the photo as if afraid it might fade at his fingertips. The memory that returned to his eyes was not simple. It was layered with guilt, love, hope, regret, and something deeper. "This child," Sandra said quietly, "is the one you made the promise to." Keanu nodded. The silence around them thickened. "I promised I would return when I learned how to be someone worth trusting," he said. "But I took too long. Life kept moving, and I let time push me further away." Sandra looked back at the picture. "But someone kept this safe. Someone brought it here." "Yes," Keanu said, "and they want me to follow the trail." They removed the photo gently and noticed something behind it. A tiny arrow drawn with a marker pointing toward a doorway that led into a darker part of the studio. The door was half open, as if waiting. Sandra felt a slight tremor in her stomach. "This feels like someone prepared all of this." "They did," Keanu said, "and they want us to see what comes next." The two of them walked toward the doorway. The hallway beyond was dim, lit only by a faint emergency lamp. Shadows stretched across the walls in uneven shapes. Sandra stayed close beside him. "Do you think the child in the photo is looking for you now?" she asked softly. Keanu shook his head. "If they were still a child, yes, but they would be grown now. They would be an adult, which means someone else is guiding this." Sandra looked thoughtful, someone who knows both sides of the promise. Keanu stepped deeper into the hallway. "Someone who wants me to face what I once ran from." They reached the end of the hallway and found another note lying on the ground. It was folded neatly. Keanu picked it up and opened it. "You are not alone in your journey. Keep going." Sandra exhaled slowly. "They know we are following their clues." "And they want us to continue," Keanu said. "Keanu," Sandra whispered, "are you ready for what the truth might be?" Keanu looked ahead. The path was dark, uncertain, but his face was steady. "I am ready to understand," he said slowly, "because understanding is part of the promise." And then something shifted again. From the far end of the hall, a tiny flicker of light appeared, not bright but steady. It illuminated an object resting on the floor. They walked toward it carefully. It was another item from his past. A small wooden keychain carved in the shape of a star. Sandra whispered, "This belongs to the child in the photo." Keanu closed his hand around it. "Yes, they made it for me." Now the questions grew heavier. Who placed it here? Why now? Why this moment? Why this night? And most of all, what truth was waiting for Keanu at the end of this trail? The hallway lights flickered again. "Keanu," Sandra said in a quiet voice, "someone is leading us closer to something important." Keanu nodded slowly. "And I think," he said, "they want us to find them." The small wooden keychain stayed in Keanu's hand like a piece of the past, refusing to let go. Sandra watched him quietly. The dim hallway light shimmered on the carved edges of the little star, and for a moment it felt like the whole world around them had paused. The silence was not empty anymore. It carried weight, history, and something unspoken waiting to surface. "Keanu," Sandra whispered, "this feels personal. Whoever placed these things knows what they mean to you." Keanu nodded slowly. This star was the child's favorite symbol. They carved it one night with a tiny pocket knife and said it was a piece of hope. They asked me to keep it, so I never forgot what I meant to them. Sandra softened. "And did you keep it?" "I did," he said, "until I lost it. I looked for it for years. I thought it was gone forever. But now it was here. Not by accident. Not by coincidence. Someone had brought it back to him with clear intention." As the two stood in the fading light, a sudden sound echoed softly from deeper in the building. It was faint, almost like a breath or a quiet click, but enough to make both of them turn their heads. Sandra straightened. That came from the sound stage. Keanu placed the keychain in his pocket and led the way. They walked through the hall, past old props and stacked set pieces that cast long shadows on the ground. Their steps were careful but firm. The tension between them grew heavier, but so did their resolve. When they reached the old sound stage door, they noticed something strange. The door was slightly open. A single strip of light spilled across the floor, as if someone had been inside moments ago. Sandra exchanged a look with Keanu. He pushed the door open gently, and they both stepped inside. The room was dim but not empty. Studio equipment stood in silent rows. The air was heavy, carrying a faint smell of dust and forgotten moments. Sandra scanned the room slowly. "Something feels off," she whispered. Keanu nodded. "Something is guiding us." They walked deeper into the stage. Keanu's eyes landed on a table set near the center of the room. A single object lay on top of it. A journal. Not the old one. A different one. Clean and modern. As if recently used. Sandra stepped forward. "This is not yours." "No," Keanu said, "but someone wants us to read it." They approached the table slowly. Keanu opened the new journal, and on the very first page there was a message written in the same gentle handwriting from the earlier note. "You left a promise behind, but someone else carried it with them. You are closer than you know." Sandra felt her breath catch. So whoever is leaving these notes, they knew the child too. "Yes," Keanu said softly, "or they know the story from the inside." He turned the page. More writing filled the second page, short lines that felt almost like someone was speaking directly to him. "You were not wrong to leave. You were only lost. But someone waited for you to return. Someone believed the promise still mattered." Keanu's fingers tightened on the edge of the page. His voice was steady, but his eyes showed the storm building inside him. "This is not someone who blames me," he said quietly. "This is someone who understands." Sandra touched his arm gently. "Keanu, whoever this is, they care about this story as much as you do." Keanu looked at her. "Yes, and that makes this even more personal." He turned another page. This time there was a drawing. Sandra leaned closer and gasped softly. It was a sketch of the same child from the photo. Older now. A teenager. Eyes still warm. Still hopeful. Still carrying the same soft smile. "Keanu," she whispered, "someone drew them growing up." He stared at the page. "This is how they would look now." "So the person leaving clues must know them," Sandra said. "They must know their life, their path, their feelings, everything." Keanu turned the page again. On the next page, one single line was written. "They never forgot you." Keanu's breath shook for the first time. The words hit deeper than anything he had read so far. He closed the journal slowly, letting the emotions settle inside him. Sandra could feel how much he carried in that moment. She stepped close, her voice gentle. "You believed you failed them," she said. "But these notes are showing the opposite. Someone wants you to know your promise still mattered." Keanu nodded. "And someone wants me to find the truth now." Just then, a light flickered near the far exit of the sound stage. Both of them turned. The emergency light above the door blinked twice, and something small on the ground reflected its glow. "Another clue," Sandra said. They walked toward it. On the floor lay a folded piece of paper, carefully placed as if it waited for them. Keanu picked it up. Inside, a simple address was written in soft handwriting. Sandra tilted her head. "Do you recognize it?" Keanu stared for a moment, eyes widening slightly. "Yes," he said. "It is a center. A small community center outside the city. The child used to go there. They loved it. It was the one place they felt safe." Sandra felt a wave of realization. "So the next step is there." Keanu nodded. "Yes, someone wants us to go." But then Sandra noticed something else. On the back of the paper, lightly written but clear, were 4 words that made the air around them shift. "Someone is waiting there." Keanu closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "This is it," he said. "This is where the truth begins." Sandra placed a hand on his shoulder. Her voice was calm. "You are not going alone. I am going with you." Keanu met her eyes, grateful and steady. "Thank you." The sound stage felt colder now, as if the walls themselves understood the weight of the journey they were about to take. They stepped out of the room, leaving the flickering light behind, moving toward the truth they had avoided for years. Neither spoke as they walked out of the studio. They did not need words. The path was clear. The story was pulling them forward. And someone was waiting for Keanu to keep a promise he made long ago. The night outside the studio felt colder than before. Sandra and Keanu walked to the car without speaking. The address from the note stayed in Keanu's hand, warm from his touch but carrying a weight that chilled both of them. The quiet between them was not uncomfortable. It was full of focus, full of thoughts that neither could yet shape into words. When they reached the car, Sandra paused before getting in. She looked at Keanu carefully. "Are you sure you are ready for this?" she asked softly. Keanu opened the passenger door and exhaled slowly. "I think I have been waiting for this moment without knowing it." Sandra nodded. "Then we go together." They sat inside and started driving toward the community center. The road was long and mostly empty, lit by streetlights that stretched into the distance like tiny silent witnesses. The city around them felt strangely asleep, as if giving them space to face the truth without interruption. Sandra kept her eyes on the road while Keanu watched the world pass by outside the window. He did not seem nervous. He seemed thoughtful, like someone preparing to meet a part of himself he had forgotten. "Tell me about them," Sandra said gently. "The child you made the promise to." Keanu took a moment before answering. They were quiet but warm, thoughtful. They trusted people easily even when they should not have. Life was difficult for them. They did not have a strong support system. But they found peace in small things. They would draw stars, write little notes, laugh at simple jokes. Sandra smiled softly, "And they looked up to you." Keanu nodded. "Yes, they would watch the way I handled things. They listened to every story I shared. They said I made them feel like their life could be bigger than the pain they knew." His voice softened even more. "And I promised them that one day, when I learned how to be a better person, I would come back and guide them. I promised I would never disappear." Sandra felt the heaviness of that sentence, but something happened. "Yes," Keanu said, "life became complicated. Success came too fast, decisions came too quickly. I thought I would return the next week or the next month, but time kept slipping away, and then the chance was gone." Sandra reached out and placed her hand gently over his. "Keanu, you did not abandon them. You were young, you were confused, you were trying to survive." Keanu looked at her. "That does not change the pain my absence caused." "No," Sandra said softly, "but someone clearly believes the promise still matters. They want you to finish what you started." Keanu looked back out the window, and the emotion in his eyes softened just slightly. As they got closer, the city lights faded behind them. The world grew quieter. The trees along the road looked darker. Sandra slowed down as the community center came into view. It was a small building with warm lights glowing through its windows, peaceful and familiar despite the years that had passed. Keanu stared at it. "It looks exactly the same," he whispered. They parked the car and stepped out. The air was cold, and the soft wind carried the smell of old wood and quiet memories. Keanu approached the building slowly, almost as if he was walking into a memory instead of a place. When he reached the door, he hesitated. Sandra stood beside him, giving him space while staying close enough to support him. "Keanu," she said softly, "you do not have to be perfect right now, you just have to be honest." He nodded and pushed the door open. Inside, the community center was warm and softly lit. The hall had the same wooden floor, the same old chairs, the same quiet charm. Keanu looked around with a face full of memory. He walked slowly, touching the back of one of the chairs. "This is where we used to sit," he whispered. "We talked for hours in this room." Sandra watched him closely. They walked deeper into the center until they reached a wall covered with old drawings, photos, and little notes. Some were faded, some were bright. All of them told stories of children who passed through the center. Keanu froze when he saw something in the middle of the board. A drawing. A star. The same shape as the wooden keychain. Drawn with small, careful lines filled with hope. Beneath the drawing, a message was written in the same gentle handwriting. "You kept my light alive even when you left." Sandra stepped closer. "Keanu, this handwriting matches the notes." He nodded silently. But there was more. Beneath the message, another small arrow pointed toward a doorway at the back of the hall. A soft light glowed behind it. Sandra looked at him. "Someone wants us to go in there." Keanu inhaled slowly, then walked toward the door. Sandra followed. When they reached the room, Keanu pushed the door open gently. Inside, the room was quiet and warm, filled with soft white lights. On a table at the center sat a small box, just one, wooden old, carved with the same star symbol. Keanu approached it with steady steps. Sandra stood by his side. When Keanu opened the box, Sandra saw his eyes soften with shock. Inside the box was another journal. A small one, handmade, the cover decorated with a familiar star. Sandra held her breath as Keanu opened the first page. The handwriting inside was the same. Small, gentle, filled with warmth. Dear Keanu, I thought you would forget me, but I never forgot you. Keanu's hand trembled for a moment. Sandra felt her own chest tighten. The room felt charged with emotion, almost glowing with the past. He turned to the next page. You once said you would return when you understood life. I waited because I believed you would. Keanu closed his eyes for a second, pain passing through them like a shadow. The next page held a single sentence that made Sandra step closer, involuntarily. Someone has been keeping your promise alive for you. Sandra whispered, Keanu, this means someone else was here with them. Someone who knew their story, someone who guided them. Keanu opened to the next page. Another message. And they want to meet you now. The room fell silent. Keanu looked up slowly. Someone is here, he said quietly. Tonight. Sandra felt the air shift. Then they have been watching us, waiting for this moment. Keanu closed the journal gently. And now the past is calling me forward. As he placed the journal back in the box, a soft sound echoed from the hallway outside. A careful step. A quiet breath. The presence of someone just beyond the door. Keanu and Sandra turned at the same time. Someone was waiting in the shadows. Someone connected to the promise. Someone who knew the truth Keanu had avoided for years. And now the moment had arrived. The sound in the hallway was soft, almost hesitant, like someone gathering the courage to step forward. Sandra and Keanu stood perfectly still, their eyes fixed on the doorway. The quiet inside the community center grew heavier with every passing second. It felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Keanu took one slow step toward the door. Sandra stayed beside him, matching his pace. The soft light from the small room spilled gently across the floor, reaching toward the dark hallway like a bridge waiting for someone to cross it. Whoever is there, Sandra whispered, they are not here to hurt us. They have taken great care to guide us. Keanu nodded slightly. Yes, and I think they are trying to bring closure, not fear. Another sound came, a faint shift, a quiet inhale. Keanu called out, his voice calm and warm. It is all right, you can come inside. A long moment passed before a figure slowly stepped into the light. At first, only the silhouette appeared. Tall, steady, not threatening, not hiding, just someone trying to hold their emotions together. Then they stepped forward fully, revealing a young adult, maybe in their early 20s, with soft, expressive eyes and a familiar calmness in their posture. Sandra's breath caught. Keanu froze. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same eyes as the child in the photograph. The same quiet strength. The same soft smile that hid both pain and hope. The young adult stood still, hands clasped together, unsure how to begin. Keanu's voice trembled, not with fear, but with emotion he had held inside for far too long. It is you, he whispered. The young adult nodded slowly. Yes, I am the child from your past. Sandra felt her heart lift and break at the same time. The weight of years, the silence of memories, the longing hidden in every note, they all stood in this room now, breathing the same air. Keanu stepped closer, but he moved gently, giving the young adult space. I looked for you, he said softly. For years, I wanted to come back, I wanted to keep my promise, but life moved fast and I lost the path. I am sorry, I am so deeply sorry. The young adults shook their head. You do not need to apologize, I knew you were lost, not gone. Sandra felt a tear push against the corner of her eye. She wiped it quietly. The young adult continued. When you left, I did not know why. I thought maybe I failed you, or maybe I did something wrong. But then I grew older and I understood what life does to people. I understood that sometimes hearts break without warning, dreams shift, people change. Their voice softened even more. But the promise you made never left me. It stayed like a small light inside me, even on the hardest days, and someone helped keep that light alive. Keanu inhaled sharply. Someone else, the one who wrote the notes. The young adult nodded. Yes, someone who knew you, someone who understood your heart better than most people. Sandra's eyes widened gently. Who is it? The young adult looked toward the hallway as if expecting someone else to appear, but the corridor stayed empty. Finally, they turned back to Keanu. It was a caretaker from this center, they said. They were there when you and I became close. They saw how much you changed my life. They saw how much I looked up to you. When you left, they were the one who explained that you needed time. They kept your promise alive in my memory. They made sure I never felt abandoned. Keanu's chest tightened. Where are they now? The young adult looked at the floor for a moment. Their voice softened with tenderness and loss. They passed away last year. Keanu closed his eyes slowly. The room felt heavier but not dark. It felt filled with the kind of emotion that shapes a life forever. Before they died, the young adult continued, they told me something important. They said you would return one day. They said your heart was too honest to forget a promise, and they left a message for you. Keanu opened his eyes again. The notes, the clues, the journals. The young adult nodded. Yes, they prepared everything. They knew you would find the journal one day. They knew you would follow the trail, but I added something too. Sandra leaned forward. What did you add? The young adult's warm eyes turned toward Keanu. I wrote that last note that said you were closer than you think. Keanu felt something shift inside him, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and deep emotional release. I needed you to know, the young adult said, that despite the years and the silence, I never stopped believing in you. Keanu took another step closer, but still moved with care. And I never stopped thinking about you. You shaped the person I became. Your belief in me was something I carried even when I did not understand myself. The young adult's eyes glistened. You came back, that is what matters. Sandra watched them both, feeling the depth of connection that words could barely describe. She saw two lives, separated by time, finally finding each other again. Keanu's voice was calm but full. Thank you for not giving up on me, he said. The young adult smiled, the same soft smile from the old photograph. Do you want to read the rest of the journal I kept for you? Keanu nodded, more than anything. They sat together at the table in the warm room. Sandra quietly joined them, but she stayed silent, understanding that this moment belonged to them more than anyone else. The young adult opened the handmade journal. Keanu leaned in, and Sandra could see the hope in both their faces. The first page they turned revealed a message written years ago. Dear Keanu, I hope one day you will read this. I hope you will know that your presence changed me more than your absence hurt me. Keanu exhaled slowly. Page after page revealed pieces of their journey. Dreams, fears, memories, moments when they missed him, moments when they believed in him, moments when the caretaker kept the promise alive. Each line carried something powerful. Finally, they reached the last written page. The day you return is the day the promise becomes whole. Keanu placed his hand over the journal gently. The promise, he whispered, was never about being perfect. It was about being present, being truthful, being human. The young adult nodded softly, and now you are here. The three of them sat in quiet warmth, letting the moment settle. The past had finally met the present. But just as the silence began to calm, Sandra noticed something. A small sealed envelope tucked inside the back cover of the journal. Her voice was soft. There is something else in here. Keanu lifted the envelope slowly. The front had no name, only a drawing. A star. He felt the energy in the room shift again. This must be from the caretaker, Sandra said. Keanu inhaled deeply, preparing himself. The truth inside that envelope was waiting. And it would reveal something none of them expected. Keanu held the sealed envelope in his hand for a long moment. The room around them fell completely silent, as if every sound had stepped aside to give space to the truth that waited inside. Sandra watched with calm, steady eyes. The young adult waited too, their hands folded gently on the table, their breath soft but expectant. Keanu ran his thumb across the sealed edge. The envelope was old but not fragile. It had been kept safe, protected, preserved for a moment just like this. "When you are ready," Sandra said quietly, "open it." Keanu nodded, took a slow breath, and broke the seal with delicate care. Inside the envelope was a folded letter, the paper soft and slightly worn. He unfolded it slowly, almost reverently. The handwriting was different. Older, gentler, filled with warmth, filled with someone's final truth. Keanu began to read. "Dear Keanu, if you are holding this letter, then the journey you avoided has finally brought you back." He paused, his chest tightening. The caretaker's voice lived inside those words. He continued reading. "I watched you and the child with my own eyes. I saw how much your presence changed their world. I saw how deeply they trusted you. And I saw how much your absence hurt them when you left. But I also understood your heart. I knew you did not leave because you stopped caring. You left because you did not yet know how to stay." Keanu exhaled slowly. Sandra touched his arm gently. The young adult's eyes softened. The letter continued. "When you walked away, the child believed they had done something wrong. They believed they lost your love. I could not let them grow up with that weight, so I kept your promise alive. I told them the truth. I told them that some hearts take longer to understand themselves. I told them that your journey was not finished, and I promised them that you would return when you learned who you were meant to be." Keanu closed his eyes, the pain and gratitude rising together. He opened them again and read on. "The journal you found is not only a memory of your past, it is a reflection of your growth. You wrote it when you were uncertain, when you were afraid of becoming someone you did not want to be. But the person you became, the world knows. The world sees your kindness, your humility, your steady heart. I saw it too." His voice softened as he read. "You kept the promise without knowing it. You became the man the child believed you could be." Sandra felt her throat tighten. The young adult wiped a quiet tear from their cheek. Keanu turned to the final part of the letter. "Do not carry guilt anymore. Do not carry regret. Your return was never about the time that passed. It was about the courage to face what remained. And now that you are here, the child is no longer waiting. They are ready to walk their path with strength. You gave them that strength long ago. Be proud of the person you became. And know that my last wish was simple. Reunite with them, and let the promise complete itself." Keanu's voice cracked softly on the last line. "With peace and gratitude, the one who kept the light alive." When he finished reading, the room was silent again, but it was not the heavy silence from before. It was warm, full, complete. Keanu folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. The young adult looked at him with gentle, steady eyes. "They believed in you," the young adult said. "All these years, they believed you would return." Keanu nodded. "I wish I could thank them." "You just did," the young adult whispered. Sandra leaned closer. "What do you feel now?" Keanu took a deep breath, not a troubled breath, but a breath of release. The kind a person takes when something long buried finally rises and dissolves. "I feel peace," he said softly, "and I feel grateful, not because everything is perfect now, but because I finally faced the truth. I finally kept the promise." The young adult smiled, and the smile held the same light as the drawing of the star. "You did, and I want you to know something." "What is it?" Keanu asked. "I did not grow up angry at you," they said. "I grew up inspired by you. Your kindness stayed with me. Your words stayed with me. Your promise shaped me. You might think you were gone, but you were always present in the way I learned to be strong." Sandra placed a hand over her heart, moved by the connection unfolding. Keanu felt tears press behind his eyes, but they were gentle tears, filled with clarity and acceptance. "Thank you," he whispered, "for waiting, for believing, for understanding me better than I understood myself." The young adult stepped closer. "Can I give you something?" Keanu nodded. They reached into their bag and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. They unwrapped it slowly, revealing something simple but beautiful. A wooden star, carefully carved, glowing softly under the warm lights. A grown-up version of the one they made as a child. Keanu touched it with trembling fingers. "You made another one," he whispered. "Yes," they said, "because I wanted you to carry it again, not as a reminder of what you lost, but of what you found. Keanu closed his hand around the star. It fit perfectly in his palm, like it had always belonged there. This time, he said softly, I will never lose it. The young adult smiled. I know. Sandra stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on Keanu's back. You completed the journey, she said softly, and the promise came full circle. Keanu nodded. Yes, it did. The three of them stood together in the quiet room, surrounded by warm light, old memories, and new beginnings. Keanu no longer felt the weight of regret. The young adult no longer felt the ache of abandonment. And the caretaker's final wish had been fulfilled. As they stepped out of the community center into the calm night, the sky above them was clear and full of stars. Keanu looked up, holding the wooden star in his hand. Sandra stood beside him. The young adult stood on his other side. And in that moment, everything aligned. The past had been healed. The promise had been honored. And a new chapter had begun.